Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rehman, live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about a very interesting statement given by our Foreign Minister, Shahrukh Qureshi Sahab. And he said that India is no more a secular state. Rather, the philosophy of Gandhi and Nehru, they have lost it, and now they are following the ideology of RSS. The extremist Hindu mindset that is prevailing in India at the moment is making life very difficult for the minorities, especially for the Muslims. Now, whatever happened in Kashmir or is happening in Kashmir today is technically the 100th day of curfew that has been imposed in the Indian occupied Kashmir. Life, you all can understand what kind of life are they living at the moment. But having said that, the philosophy of Nehru and the philosophy of Gandhi, the concept of love and that secular concept that every person can live together despite the fact that whatever religion you belong to. But unfortunately, this is no more the case. It has become a country of extremists where there are a lot of problems for all those who are not Hindus. That's the point. We'll be talking about that in our today's program, exactly where India is heading and what sort of, I would say, problems can they face at some stage. Because if you remember 10 years ago, Mr. Jashwant, who was also from BJP, also was a minister, said that India is going to be divided into three. We have seen one was Pakistan, one was Bangladesh, now you're talking about a third division. Primarily, whatever is happening at the moment, somebody is declaring independence sitting in Europe about Manipur. The people living on the extreme east of India, in Khalistan, probably have something else in their mind. Whatever is happening in the north, we are all aware of it. And you talk about certain other states, there is a lot of problem. Especially Muslims at the moment, they are not feeling secure at all. So obviously a lot can happen. But there were a couple of very interesting statements. Let me read those out for you before I introduce my guest. It says, I'm perplexed and disturbed. The Constitution gives the right to everyone and justice has to be given to everyone. But in this case, the justice has not been done to minorities. So you can well imagine the kind of, this was by retired Justice A.K. Ganguly from Calcutta. Then he says that this is undeniable, and it is also undeniable that the mosque was demolished by sheer act of vandalism. Even the Supreme Court has its verdict and said that this is a gross violation of the rule of law and act of vandalism. In that scenario, the question is that who has been wronged? Is this the minorities that have been wronged? And furthermore, Pakistani Foreign Office has also said that this particular decision points out that when means the court acts, it is unable to protect the interest of India's minorities. Shah Mahmood Qureshi added that India of today, as I earlier mentioned, he said, India of today is not India of Gandhi and Nehru. It is now Hindustan, which is dominated by the supremacist hindutva ideology. After disregarding Gandhi's values, secular India has got buried under RSS ideology. So you can well imagine this is exactly what I was earlier talking about. But let me introduce you to our panelists and then we'll start our discussion. We have with us in our studio on my right is Ambassador Arslan Sahab, is a senior diplomat. So thank you very much for taking out your time and being here. And we have with us Air Vice Marshal retired Ikramullah Bhatti Sahab, who's a senior defense analyst, sir. Thank you very much. And we have with us Dr. Umar Hayat Basit Sahab, who's a foreign affairs expert. Sir, thank you very much for being a part of our show. But sir, let's start off from this very interesting statement of Shah Mahmood Qureshi Sahab. He says and he believes that everything in India is now being dominated by this Hindutva or RSS ideology, sir. And it is no more a secular state, and that concept of Gandhi and Nehru, the real concept, that has been buried now. Your take, sir.
Yes, you also mentioned about the Babri Mosque, how back in 1992, the mosque was demolished, and the Hindus want to build a temple there because God Ram apparently was born from there. It is from that date onwards, 1992, that we have really seen the end of secularism taking place. The trajectory has been onwards. This action resulted in condemnation by the majority Muslim states and led to riots all over India. So I think during the years that followed, and especially under Modi, the hindutva policy and the anti-Muslim policy and minorities got a big impetus. And now this seems to have, affected the mindset of those who align themselves with this hindutva policy. Take the judgment itself.
A lot of people believe, Ambassador Saab, that this was under the influence of the religion, sir.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
It could have been different, but because of the pressure, this was the problem.
Well,
one of the judge, I mean, he's going to retire in a week's time.
Okay, so one of the things was that any state institution, when it comes to issues of faith and devotion, should bear in mind the sensitivities of the people involved, especially when it is a sectarian issue. And perhaps it would have been best if the Supreme Court would have granted the side to neither side, but while recognizing on one hand the illegality of the action which led to the riots, etc., they have allowed them to build the temple on top of that. So it just shows how the creeping influence of the Hindutva policy is having on the Indian psyche. It is taking place. Now, interestingly also, it should be noted that, the timing of this decision, here was Pakistan opening a gate for the minorities, facilitating, and there they were trying to destroy and, cause minorities, ending the secularism in India, as the Foreign Minister very rightly said, end of the tolerance and non-violence of Gandhi, and the secularism praised by Nehru. So we are seeing this. Now I think the main thing is the people of India. They have to decide whether they are going to accept the Hindu Rashtra, or they would like to retain the democracy, or permit the minorities to become second-class citizens in their own country. It's for the people of India, and you see already there are voices being raised against the present policy of Hindutva.
I mean, what we have witnessed earlier, sir, I mean, when in 1990, Avim Saab, what we witnessed was that the BJP started having its influence, especially in UP. And then this particular incident under the leadership of L.K. Advani took place, right, sir, in 1992 December. So you can call that, it was a transition period in a way, sir, from the secular mindset into an extremist mindset. If you compare L.K. Advani and Vajpayee Saab to Amit Shah or Narendra Modi, you will see the difference. They were extremists, but these guys are a step ahead, sir. So the direction seems to be something which India shouldn't have followed, but they are. And in a very consistent way, sir. Look at the changes they have made during the last almost, let's say, 25, 30 years. It seems that the RSS mindset, that ideology eventually is going to prevail all over, sir.
Well, you see, I read an article today which commented on this decision in a statement that it is the victory of religious intolerance over history and evidence. And of course, our legal experts would be able to best comment on the legality of this judgment, but the fact is that Indian's judicial system was known for very fair and just decisions.
Oh yes, indeed.
And however, of late, we saw one verdict on Article 370, and the advice given to the Indian government was that they should take a decision in the national interest. That means they set aside justice and fair play and let national interest overrule whatever they want to do. And that in fact was a precursor to subsequent decisions. And now when we see this, it is a totally religiously oriented decision. And you see, the mosque was constructed in 1528, and the issue started from 1948 onwards, when suddenly one day some idols were found
Yes.
in the mosque,
Yep.
and thereafter the issue picked up. And in over 1,000-page verdict that Supreme Court has issued, the operative element is principle of probabilities, in which they say that the Muslim side has not been able to prove that Muslims were offering prayers in the mosque from 1528 until 1958 or 1857, and they wanted a documentary evidence for this. Whereas there are inscriptions within the mosque that this mosque was constructed in a certain year during the time of Babur.
Yep.
And it is impossible to imagine or believe that a mosque has been constructed by the ruler, by the Shahnshah of India, and regular prayers have not been taking place over there.
Absolutely, sir.
So you're right. From 1992 onwards, when BJP, which is basically driven by RSS mentality, they started to use religion or religious intolerance or extremism to win votes, and that is how they were able to defeat Congress. And thereafter, we see.
Look at the kind of hold they have in UP in particular, sir.
And that has became
more population than
that was
Pakistan.
their stronghold. And ever since, we find that they have been able to mobilize this intolerance, this extremism within their voters. And unfortunately, we've seen that lynching of Muslims has started to take place, and there is open intolerance and extremism being exercised against
Child
minorities.
abuse, women are being raped, lynching, as you earlier mentioned. I mean, that has become a very okay norm, I would say, sir. I mean, every time we hear that a person was carrying a buffalo or something, or the meat, he was dead after an hour or something.
And
the way they've been
India
killing
used to
people
always take pride in declaring itself as the largest democracy, the largest secular country, and where the minority religions are being accommodated and being tolerated. But unfortunately, as you mentioned, since 1992, it is no longer a democracy. It is gradually almost has become a fascist state. And of course, there is no religious tolerance, there is no secularism, and their ministers openly say that this is going to be a country for Hindus only. So this is unfortunate that this government, this political party has taken on a direction, a narrative, which to them is probably a recipe for a political victory, but unfortunately it is a recipe for their own disaster, because very soon, if they continue like this, they are going to create such a lot of alienation within their own country.
They have already done that.
That
people are not at all feeling safe.
They'll have a lot of unrest,
Yeah,
and retaliation. And we already mentioned Manipur has already declared independence, and there are several secessionist and independence movements going on. They'll all gain momentum. They'll all gain force.
They believe that their culture is under threat. So that's the thing. I mean, when your culture and your traditions, and your values and your norms, and
since 1992, they have changed their school syllabus. They have changed the name of cities, roads, and they want to change history.
absolutely, this is what they're doing, sir.
And which is they're again, as I said, alienating the minorities. They're pushing them against the wall.
All right. Now, Dr. when you see that a certain mindset is prevailing and it's expanding, and if you look at the direction, I mean, we don't care whether it's secular or it's extremism mindset or whatever. But at least at the end of the day, when you talk about minorities, sir, Muslims, Sikhs, Dalits, Christians, is it for everyone, or in particular you believe that the Muslims are being targeted, sir?
No, let me tell you, the conception of minority and majority is linked with democracy, point one. Point two is, when we talk about Gandhi's message of peace, we don't look at it with one angle and see this was Gandhi's message of peace. Don't forget, at the same time, Europe experienced two great wars, very lethal wars, World War I and II. And his message resonates, but it was not even in his own brainchild. advocating peace and non-violence moments. It was because he has experienced apartheid moment in Africa and 2 great wars in Europe, one. 2 is the concept of minority and majority. This region has never been into this kind of concept. Muslims were in minority in South Asia. They've been ruling, and there was justice, and justice prevailed. And you know, if you see now, and historians and analysts have realized this fact, that India was the most prosperous, the India, pre-partition India, which this whole region was part of, was most prosperous region in the world, with greater GDP and well life, and people were enjoying better life, and even the world wanted to come to India.
Yep.
Talk about 400, 500 years ago, for example. Now, when you're connecting this with what is happening now, if I understand your question in minority and majority in this frame, I'll have to tell you one thing. Unfortunately, post-colonial societies, predominantly India and South Asia, is not actually post-colonial India. It is still colonial India. They're continuing the colonial legacy and the practices. Now what's happening is, and with the rise of globalization and flooding of information, availability of information, in early 21st century, when the people realized their rights and they wanted to demand, and they had different channels and avenues to express themselves, those responsible with huge population, over 1 billion population, the governments had to deliver. Now, there was a rise of emotions and the population. So they, instead of delivering, they channelized that as hatred towards otherization by creating another group. And that's a psychological disorder, but this psychological disorder is political opportunism. So these political leaders, for example, if you call Modi a political leader, I would not agree. He is an opportunist who capitalized on people's emotion in India instead of focusing on deliverables for the emancipation and well-being of the millions and millions living in India. He focused and he tried to divert their attention towards creating an artificial other, a group that you can target and you can try to channelize their energies towards that side.
Is it
now,
working well for him?
You know what? There are dark ages in every nation's life and every region. In our history, there was an era when we had some kind of rightist moments who were who had some stake and who were assertive in our national discourse and our policies 20 years ago, 25, 30 years ago. But now we are trying to learn how to be a welfare state and how to work for the well-being of the people. Unfortunately, India and even some intellectuals, so to speak, are trying to redo history and rewrite history. But in that, what they're doing is they're creating a scenario which is going to be disastrous for Indian future. So they're stuck in past and they're in an effort to destroy the future. And remember, what is hopeful and at the same time alarming is that sane voices in India, the people who can question, who are reasonable, they've been pushed to wall and they're not given the proper space. And that is hopeful because given the diversity and this region is very, this region has a different kind of dynamics and the people in this region have a different kind of, state of mind. So I think it's not going to favor India if India stays as India it is today, one. Two is
but you believe that it's not going to stay like this? Looking at the current scenario.
Presently, unfortunately, sane voices in India have been pushed to the wall. Whatever, we disagree with them, but they're still within Indian conceptual framework, legal, constitutional framework, there are sane voices in India. I don't want to name them, but they've been pushed to wall. But with the hope that I have is the region and broader perspective that these people are going to have their say in this space.
All right.
In worst scenario, in a very positive scenario, India stays as it is. But what I foresee is that India is unfortunately, or let's say fortunately, for the well-being of the people, not just highlighting the fault lines that have never been highlighted before, it's widening those fault lines and the divides within India. And I think this is an opportunity for us to think beyond colonial mindset, which unfortunately, the last program when I was talking about it, this is where I ended. Pakistan is truly a decolonized part, but what unfortunately with us was wrong, that we could not create a solution or a system which is in its true sense post-colonial or decolonized society. So what we need to do is to think beyond what we have learned. So it's a question for us to unlearn and change even our own perspective on how we look at the world and how we look at the religion and how we look at our people and even the people in India. We have to look more beyond our borders, and we have to look for the well-being and emancipation of the people, not just in Pakistan, but also in India.
Now, Asaf, what we have witnessed over a period of time, let's say last 10 years, 15 years or so, that in most of the European countries, even in Asia, in particular in South Asia, the rightist parties, or slightly towards extremist mindset, they've been taken over, sir. What does that indicate, sir?
Well, I think the nationalism seems to be gaining ground. Most of the parties are, you are right, to the right side. But, you know, about a next door neighbor, I think it is for each country to decide what kind of a system they want, whether it's democracy or secularist, or they want to be, you know, having a hindutva policy. And what happens in South America, one country or the other. For Pakistan, it should not be, you know, a matter of concern. It is a matter of concern for Pakistan, however, because A, it involves Kashmiris, and B, the large number of Muslims in India. Therefore, it is important that Pakistan should worry about what is taking place there. I mean, just to, you know, in Kashmir, yes, the people are suffering there. They even denied the use of their masjid. I mean, they are, you know,
they couldn't celebrate
masjid.
They couldn't go out. Yeah. They couldn't offer prayers on the Friday. I mean, so many.
Yeah. So I'm just giving you an example. But where the danger lies is that because of the hindutva policy, what will happen now after the Supreme Court decision? This will encourage the hindutva foot soldiers to become more aggressive, to, you know, pursue more, you know, violence from there. And there are already, you know, with the revoking the Articles 370 and 35 in Kashmir, then printing another map and so on. They are getting into a delusion in the government of Prime Minister Modi, that they are now becoming very powerful and they can get away with anything. Now, because of this reason and their demand for hegemonic design in the region, you know, they are nuclearization policy going into the Indian Ocean from there, the satellite destruction in space, and the anti-ballistic missile, you know, systems and so on, and their doctrine of cold start, etc. Now, these things are a question of great worry, because they might just have a false flag operation and may want to have a fight with us from there. And two nuclear powers, it's a danger not only for the two countries, but in the region, but for the whole world. So the policies there have a direct bearing within Pakistan, and because of these various factors, and we have to be conscious of that. And for, you know, as far as the defense is concerned, alhamdulillah, armed forces are in a position to take them on. They are well prepared for that, and it will be a grave mistake on their part if they go into any misadventure. Politically too, we are seeing that Pakistan is playing its cards very well in the international world. Looking at the situation here, where is Pakistan, you know, talking about the cultural and religious tourism in the country, looking after minorities, even talking about, the Hindu temples here like Kartasraj
Yeah.
and in Balochistan and also in Tharparkar and so on. So here is a country which is wanting to open out and thinking in terms of making goodwill gestures on our part and looking for cooperation, peace and development in the region. Another country which is talking of destruction, talking about attacking another country and having all kind of doctrine. So but as rightly pointed out, these actions are having a manifestation within India. You can see, as you rightly mentioned, there are these various insurgencies that are taking place for independence. There are those who declared independence already. There are other countries, other states also talking about it. Internationally, the Kashmir issue is, is from the American to the Europeans. Everybody is talking about the danger which is lying in Kashmir and what India is doing wrong. So its image is getting very, very tarnished. So it is, perhaps going into self-destruction as the time goes by. But the danger, as I
So
said
whatever
earlier,
moves which we have seen were undertaken by the current Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, is not going to lead India where he wants India to go. Rather, there's going to be a lot of problem on the way.
But the danger, as I said, lies because they might think that their policies are working very well, and they may want to do something foolhardy in the sense of trying to
can't
take
rule out
on
that.
Pakistan.
Sir, I'll just come back. Sir,
Well, you see, we had a question as to why is Indian government or the current regime pursuing this policy, and are only the Muslims the targets? Well, if you go back to 1947, I think one reason for Pakistan to come into existence or Muslims of the subcontinent to seek a separate country was their perceived fear of Hindu aspirations to avenge the 700-year rule by the Muslims. And while it was a perception, it came true after 71 war when the Indian leadership declared that today they had avenged that Muslim rule and they had buried the two-nation theory at the sea. So I think their target is primarily Muslims and Pakistan. And this targeting emanates out of that aspiration to take revenge of the
because they were
700
always invaded from the north, so this is the revenge they are taking in the 21st century.
Yes. So, and they've been able to indoctrinate or brainwash their voters that this is something that they ought to do, and to keep, as you said, to keep their culture pure of this impurity in the shape of Muslims, which has come from, across their borders. So that has changed into hatred, into extremism, into religious fanaticism, and of course, the state looks the other way. We have seen their security forces, their police look the other way when the Hindu mobs, either they operate in that Samjhota Express or in Gujarat or in the streets of different Indian cities where Muslims are lynched. And in a way, the state is sponsoring all this. If they just tolerate this, they're sponsoring it, they're promoting this. And unfortunately, the Hindu voters have come to appreciate this, come to like this, and that is a clear indication when in the recent elections we find that BJP has come with a much larger majority than it came last time.
Oh yes.
And their recipe of
And honestly,
anti-Muslim,
sir, we were not
anti-Pakistan
expecting
worked.
that. Most of the analysts doing the talk shows on TV and talking about it, they all never thought that this man is going to come up with such a huge majority, sir. He did.
So that clearly indicates that their drive, their motivation, their directing their voters in a particular direction has worked, and they are able to motivate their way. They have been able to indoctrinate. They are able to brainwash their voters in this direction, and hence this recipe is working for them, and not realizing that it is a recipe for disaster for India in the long run, because very soon the world is going to realize that India is no longer secular, India is no longer democratic, it is fascist. And in the last speech at the UNGA, the Prime Minister of Pakistan clearly compared the current regime with that of the Hitler's fascism.
Oh yes.
And there were ample signs for him to show and prove to the world that this is how it is. This is how you can compare and equalize the two. So I think the world is going to see through it, and eventually there is going to be a serious observation and objection and criticism from the world.
Is already seeing through it, but the unfortunate part is many are not talking about it. That's the dilemma.
Well, you see, there are interests.
That's the problem.
There are interests as far as the states are concerned, the state policy, because they're all interest driven. But you see, the silver lining over here is that the global public opinion, which is not interest based, which is not tainted by these business or economic interests. So that is the conscience of the world, which is fair and just. So as I keep saying, the biggest protest against the Gulf War was in the UK, where over 200,000 people came out. They were not Muslims. So
against Tony Blair, yeah.
Yes. So you see, I think the savior of entire this episode lies in the global public opinion. I believe that is going to influence their own governments, their own politicians, their own leadership, and wherein we can hope for.
No. One important question. I'm sure you would like to add on to that. But whenever you switch on TV, sir, because since we do not get many Indian channels in Pakistan, so we do not exactly know the kind of mindset that's brewing there and how they're talking about it. But so whenever you switch on Nat Geo or any other channel for that matter, you will find good slots of Indian programming.
Very true.
Right, sir? Yeah. And presenting India as if it's a part of Europe and it's a huge country, and definitely it's a big country, second largest in population. There are a lot of good things about it as well, cultural, tourism and so on and so forth. But they are projecting themselves, which they are not. Nobody knows what exactly India is at the moment.
Very true.
Nobody talks about Kashmir even.
Very
I mean,
true.
the way they have been doing things, I think, as far as Modi is concerned, I think he has been pretty successful so far, from his point of view, from his perspective. So,
You know what? When I'll tell you what's wrong the way we look at it, and also I'll try to decipher Modi's political campaign or political strategy. One, when you're talking about democracy, and India projects itself as a democracy, where this democracy comes from? Is it a South Asian historical experience?
No, sir.
It comes from the West. Two, when your Prime Minister goes in United Nations General Assembly and compares India with Nazism, was it experience in South Asia or Asia anyway? It was an experience of Europe, right? And when you talk about the word, doesn't talk about it. In fact, and between the lines, you're talking about Europe and the US and across the hemisphere, they're not talking about it. That's not the word. The word is Asia. One. Two, if I tell you the so-called democracy as a borrowed concept from the West, let us say that India advocates and projects itself as a democracy, let me decipher Modi's political strategy. Now, how it works. It is the bottom people. In simple English, the uneducated, lower literacy people who are already in poverty, they've been emotionalized and they've been motivated for the other that I just said. And then there is a group, the group of wealthy people, the group of opportunists, the fame-hungry opportunists like Modi. So they have cohort. They've joined together and they're actually fooling the masses of India. Now this is the strategy. When you say India in general, I would say no. And between these two and the center is what I just referred as the sand voices in India. Unfortunately, they are not in the power, they're not in the position. It's the voter and the opportunist. Okay, now. Two, what I'm saying is, and I disagree with Ambassador when he says we should worry about what's going on in India because there are Muslims living in India. No. If an innocent Hindu dies in India, bleeds red, and I'll feel painful. That's my way of looking at it. That's my ancestors' way of looking at it in this region. that we are empathetic, that we are concerned about the humans, whether on this side of the border or that side of the border. And then, Ambassador, I disagree with you when you talk about it, that it is for every country to decide on what kind of government they want to form. No.
Why
And
not?
the very next
Why not?
sentence, and the very next sentence, that's why, because in the very next sentence, when you talk about Modi as a rightist political ideology, you refer to what's happening in the globe. Connected? It's not for every single country on what's happening in the globe. Things are interrelated, intertwined, and connected, and they're strongly connected. What is for every country is to, in fact, figure out what you're going to do for the well-being of your people. Now, I agree, and I'm very confident about the fact that Pakistan is strong in defense. We're a nuclear power. I've studied nuclear studies. I've been teaching security. And I can say this with confidence that there is no threat to our defense. Now, go beyond defense. We have strong armed forces. We are very strong in defense. And teach the world and tell the world
point
that
is, sir,
we have a narrative.
The point is, sir, when
and
you look at the capability of India, that's very much there. No, listen, sir. Let's be realistic. I mean, there's an Air Force officer here.
All right. Okay.
And then you talk about the capability, and the second is about the intention. And once I remember, General Kiani, in fact, I had asked this question. He said, "Well, you know, intentions can change overnight. Capability cannot."
Yeah.
So when you look at the intention of Modi, I mean, this man is a dangerous man, not only for India, for the entire region, I would say for the entire globe.
That's exactly what I'm trying to tell you. We should worry about Modi and what he is doing, not because there are a number of Muslims living in India. No, that weakens our narrative. I'm sorry. We should worry about what's Modi doing because that's dangerous for the people living in India, living in this region and on the globe. I completely agree. So we can't link religion with Modi's strategy. Now, we have, and this is very unfortunate, and that really disturbs me, Faisal, when it comes to Pakistan looking at India and India looking at Pakistan, our intellectuals responding to Indian narratives and their intellectuals, so-called, responding to Pakistani narratives, their policy and Pakistan's policy, one thing you'll find common, and you can do chronological analysis, trust me, there is an action-reaction syndrome. Can't we go beyond that and be proactive? Why do we have to be
We are still stuck
reactive
there.
in everything?
We
a
have
question.
always been
I mean, I don't want
adopting
to
this reactive
refer
approach.
to
Unfortunately,
events
weren't we
or
aware of
certain
what was
statements.
India thinking regarding
We can't be
370
reactive, yeah.
or for that matter, Babri Mosque? We all knew it. And the actual the verdict came in 2010 also, sir, if I'm not wrong. You keep this much for the mosque, this much for the mandir, and this is for a playground. They all went back to the court and this was the decision. Normally, sir, in a lot of other cases, even in Pakistan, regarding the dispute on the properties of Christians, there have been decisions taken by our honorable judges on, and those were pretty biased also in certain cases. One has to understand, sir, my question again, sir, there's 57 Islamic countries. Are we the only custodians of the religion, sir? That wherever Muslims are, I mean, why not Saudi Arabia should, you know, or countries, other Muslim countries should talk about this Babri Mosque. It is in the northern part of India, close to the Nepalese border, sir, and in UP and again in the north. I mean, this place, yesterday I was also doing a show and, you know, I was just saying that this Ayodhya area is more or less like Multan, where a lot of saints came and there were a lot of places of that sort, you know, where people would go and pray and you know, as far as religion is concerned, you'll see so many shrines of the saints also. So the case was with Ayodhya, sir. There are so many mandirs there. And again, when they say that Lord Rama was born here and then this 1527 or 28 when it was built, and then eventually somebody with the name Mir Baki, if I'm not wrong, sir, was the man who was in charge. But this happened. Not even a single voice was raised.
Entire
That's
Muslim
the problem,
ummah.
sir.
Yeah.
Don't you think the first message should have been from the Crown Prince or the King of Saudi Arabia? They are the custodians of, in fact, the king is the custodian of the two holy mosques. Makes more sense.
Well, first, let me just comment about not interfering in another country, whatever the state they want. United Nations Charter gives clear guidelines as to interstate relations, the 5 cardinal principles from there. China adheres to it, so should Pakistan. It is not to say that Pakistan is not sensitive to the humanitarian crisis that is brewing in India or any other part of the world. We are in the forefront on that. And because Pakistan was created in the name of Islam, because Pakistan is a large Muslim country, because we are a nuclear power, we are looked upon for a long time as one of the leading powers or leading Muslim countries in the world.
Sir?
By virtue of its standing military, by virtue of its nuclear status, and at one time we enjoyed immense importance the world over. Look at the time of Ayub Khan, how he was regaled all over Europe and other parts of the world. Over the years, we have lost that position. But our principal stand has been always to come out in support of the Muslim community, be it Palestine or be it Rohingya, be it Kashmir, anyway. So this is the reason that we have a historical tradition, let me put it this way, that we should take it forward. The world is changing. However, the world is changing and the people have been adjusting. One can recall the meeting between our former foreign minister and the Israeli foreign minister in Turkey,
Khurshid Kasuri,
yeah. Where he was when he met him about discussing Pakistan and Israel relationship, and the question of Palestine was brought in. So he asked him, why is Pakistan holier than the Pope? Acting like that. Many Arab countries have changed, but we have stuck to
Egypt, Turkey, Jordan,
Sudan, and so on.
even Saudi Arabia.
Sure. So when you said that, why not Saudi Arabia as far as the decision which has come? Again, the world is changing. You have now Saudis having a special relationship with India. The day we are having a problem in Kashmir, the Kashmiri revoking there, they are honoring
The highest civil award, yeah.
So the world is changing. People don't have...
Sir, quick, last 1 minute, sir, quick closing remarks from you, and then over to you, sir.
Well, you see, it is always said that why is Pakistan holier than the Pope? Why are we concerned about so much of the affairs of the Muslim Ummah? And we find that there is hardly any reciprocation in case whatever issues that we face, especially Kashmir or plight of the Indian Muslims. Well, I think since 1947 and Pakistan coming into being as, in the name of religion, it became absorbed in our DNA. And you see, when we look at our religion, our faith, in which we believe that Muslims of the world are one body and anywhere, any pain is to be felt by everybody. While we continue to believe in this, we find that elsewhere in quite a few of other Muslim countries, this no longer drives their relationships. It's only now that we find at least 2 Muslim countries, Turkey and Malaysia, who are standing by with Pakistan.
Just 2 out of the 57,
yes,
sir.
Earlier on, Pakistan used to be alone.
Yeah.
So I think this sentiment has increased. From 1, it is now to 3. So, but it remains, and of course, when we do not want to accept Israel or Palestine remains an important issue for us, it emanates out of the same belief.
So,
see, I agree with the Muslims sharing common pain and everything. Okay, very well agreed. I don't want to talk more about religion, but listen, we're living in a nation-state system, 1. So we have to either accept it or reject it. 1. 2 is, when we have to look at the word and we have to find out the solution, that unfortunately goes to the West. And then we build our argument back coming to the South. Now we are from the South, and we have to look for our ways of solving our problems, and that we have to look at the end of the day. That will be the only way we'll be able to come out of it, and we'll be able to do the well-being and welfare of the people. So my concluding remark would be that it is for India and Pakistan to think collectively about the well-being and welfare of the people and they have to go beyond action-reaction syndrome and political opportunism, and they have to now sit down and talk about the well-being of the people.
And the blame game from their side needs to come to an end also, because that is something very important as well. But anyway, so thank you very much. Pleasure having you, sir. Thank you so much. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you tomorrow, inshallah. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.